Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for this video. We're going to piggyback off my Eastern Conference standings predictions, which came out yesterday on the channel. Make sure to go check that out. You'll see a link in the description probably for that one, as well as potentially a card right here. Make sure to go check that out. And then also when it comes to this video, we're going to be looking at the Western Conference and talking about who I could potentially see winning the conference, my top six, other playoff teams, play in mix. We'll look at the outside looking in and the bottom of the conference. Now listen, the Western Conference is crazy loaded. There's a lot of really great teams. I 100% can guarantee I'm going to make some people mad in this video. I'm probably going to make myself mad looking back at it because there's so much competition. I think a bunch of teams can finish anywhere between 43 and 48, 49 wins, which means you're going to have a lot of teams kind of in a spot where one or two games throughout the year can completely change how the playoff picture looks. So keep that in mind in this video. I'm sure that there's going to be something I'm wrong about. That is to be expected. I am not from the future. Okay, I don't have all of the results in front of me. I would love to get it 100% right. The reality is I probably won't. This is just more so to talk about the Western Conference, what I expect, and give my perspective. I'd love to hear your guys'. Leave it down in the comment section. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and without further ado, let's jump into my conference favorite. And I think this one is pretty simple. Reigning NBA champions, the Denver Nuggets. They are returning a majority of their top rotation. Now, they did lose Bruce Brown to the Indiana Pacers. I think that is a very big deal. Bruce Brown was awesome for the Nuggets last year, and I think they are going to be a bit thinner without him. Now, listen, they do have a guy like Christian Brown. They have a guy like Peyton Watson on roster who they're going to rely on some of those young guys to fill minutes. Mike Malone is a great head coach. I think he's going to get good minutes out of those young guys, but it is still a loss. I think that they are a bit closer to the other teams in the conference than they were a year ago. And listen, they did have some difficulty still in the playoffs last year. You think about the Phoenix Suns, they did pull 2 games against them. The Timberwolves, even without Jaden McDaniels and without Naz Reid, 2 of their 6 best players, they beat the Nuggets at least once in the postseason, and had some other competitive matchups that the Nuggets ended up winning in 5 games. But still, I don't think the Nuggets are like a lock to represent the West in the finals again. In fact, I'd almost bet against that just because it's so hard to repeat. But at the same time, there's not a specific singular team that I say, yeah, I like their odds against Denver. You know, there's teams that I would argue for. There's teams that I think have legitimate shots at beating them if everything clicks for them this year. But again, that's projection, and there's things that Denver is just so great at that other teams don't match up with very well, specifically Nikola Jokic, who just got to another level this year. And it's not just because he won the finals, it's literally just because he played his best brand of basketball yet. I think he has really improved defensively. I think his attention to detail in the playoffs was very different compared to what we had seen during the regular season. And the Nuggets, I mean, they earned a lot of my respect this last year. I was kind of hesitant going into the playoffs on if you can win with Jokic as your center, just because, not that he's not a great talent, but I was just a little concerned about the defensive side of things. And the Nuggets, one of the few teams in NBA history to have just blown everyone out with a lethal offense. And I think that's something that, you know, they had a competitive defense, a lethal offense, and it was good enough to win. And that's my reason for having them be my conference favorite this year around. Now we get into the top 6, and there's really about 9 teams I want to include into this tier, which is why this is going to be extremely challenging to pick. Now, my conference favorite picks more so about the playoffs. Top 6 here, I'm talking a little bit more seeding. The first team I'm going to throw in there is actually the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the Wolves last year, you know, they were a play-in team. They finished 8th in the Western Conference in terms of standings. But that team was really, really good. And I know people are going to say, wait, what? The 8th team in the Western Conference was really, really good. Listen, they had an all-NBA center in Karl-Anthony Towns miss over 50 games. Any other team in the league loses an all-NBA player for 50-plus games besides the Clippers, that team's probably finishing somewhere in the lottery. The Wolves had a lot of resiliency. They had a tough stretch. They ended up trading their point guard D'Angelo Russell last year, had a big shift at the deadline. You also saw, you know, kind of the implementation of Rudy Gobert. I don't think Chris Finch really knew how to coach him when he came in. I think having a year of experience with him is going to help things. The Timberwolves are going to be a lot better. If they're healthy, specifically, this team is going to be a very, very good team. I would almost consider them a lock to be in the top 6. In fact, kind of my gut pushes me to putting them in the top 4, maybe even the top 3 when it comes to regular season standings. And I do think the Wolves are going to be a very dangerous team this year. I think they're going to have some really awesome moments. They blew 18 double-digit leads last year. If they don't do that, they have an incredible record. Now, it is a knock on them. They did blow those leads. That's their problem, but it also shows, hey, they were getting out ahead of teams, and as long as they take care of business in the second half of games this year, they'll be a lot better, and that's kind of what I'm banking on. Another team that I feel confident being top 6 in the West is the Golden State Warriors. They were top 6 in the West last year, and I think that they did get better this offseason, getting Chris Paul. Now, Jordan Poole, heck of a talent, but it was pretty clear all of last season that Jordan Poole, his style of play, the amount of aggression he plays with, how kind of off balance he is as a driver of the basketball, it just lended itself to a ton of turnovers. Now the Warriors do like to play fast. Chris Paul is kind of the exact opposite of that. But I do think that brings some good things to the Warriors offense. You're going to be able to really run sets. Draymond Green, of course, a really good play initiator, but now you have maybe one of the best play initiators in NBA history in Chris Paul. We've already seen in the preseason a lot of great connections between Paul and Curry, and I expect that to continue throughout the year. The Warriors are going to be very, very good. And by no means is this an ordering here in the top 6. I'm not necessarily saying the Wolves are better than the Warriors. I think that this is kind of just a generic tier. You could interchange these teams in their own tier list, but I think for the most part there's some interesting components in here. Now I want to talk about the bottom of the conference and kind of some of the teams on the outside looking in. Really the teams that come to mind here, the Utah Jazz for right now, I like the John Collins trade for them. I think they did a good job getting him. The talent speaks for itself. He is a good player. I just don't know how much it moves the needle for them. I think guard play is still going to be the big question for me. Clarkson had a great year last year, but they just don't have that true point guard type. They did send a lot out the door when they traded Mike Conley, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt. They kind of shortened their rotation up a bit. Their depth is a little thinner now. They did have some great draft picks. A guy like Taylor Hendricks, I loved coming out of UCF. I thought that was a home run pick by Danny Ainge. Keontae George has had some brilliant flashes early through Summer League and some preseason work. I think that they did very well in the draft. I do like the pieces that they got. I think Bryce Sensabaugh was a nice pickup too for them. I think Utah's just been very, very smart. Although I think that they're a little young right now, and I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Lauri Markkanen. Is he going to be better, or does he take kind of a regression step back to where he had historically been as a player, or is he about the same? And if he's about the same or a little bit worse, this team's not going to advance further than being, say, the 11th seed in the West, in my opinion, just with how great the West is. I don't even think the Jazz are a bad team. In fact, I think they're pretty good. It's just kind of a talking point here to the Western Conference. It's just a really difficult conference. You look at these teams, it's basically a bloodbath every single night in the West, and it's honestly going to be really, really challenging to pick against any of these teams, because there's teams I like. One of them is the Houston Rockets. I think the Rockets got a lot better this offseason. I think Dillon Brooks, Fred VanVleet, now listen, they have some massive flaws, specifically when it comes to efficiency, the volume at which they shoot the basketball, specifically Fred VanVleet on dribble pull-up threes, and specifically rangy dribble pull-up threes. He likes the 30-footers. Not a good shot, in my opinion. I would not advise it, but he shoots them. Dillon Brooks loves those long twos. I think that those are going to be things that do limit what Houston is this year, but they are going to be way better defensively, and those are some of the big pros for signing guys like Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. Defensively, they really elevate what your team is, especially when you hire a guy like Ime Udoka. This Rockets team is going to look like a brand new franchise this year. And if there was a team that I was kind of nervous about kind of jumping from this outside looking in category to something up in this area of a playoff team or a play-in mix type of team, it would probably be Houston. I think that they have some pieces that are really intriguing to me. Cam Whitmore's looked awesome in the work he's got through the Summer League, of course, with Summer League MVP, and also the preseason so far. He's had some fantastic plays, a poster dunk that got called off from a bad charge call, but ultimately, Houston, he's not even my favorite rookie on the team. I love Amen Thompson. You guys know how much during the draft cycle I talked about Amen and how fantastic of a prospect I thought he was. I think Houston got a really good one with him. I think Jabari Smith, Jalen Green have massive breakout years. Houston's set up. If I keep talking here, I'm probably going to talk myself into moving them up into the play-in mix or into a playoff spot, honestly. But I just realistically do think these teams are very, very good. Now we get into really, this is the tricky spot here. Where do we put San Antonio? Some people say bottom of the conference because they have kind of gone with the patient approach. Some people put outside looking in, and some people, so I think some Spurs homers would probably argue play-in mix. I think there's a very small chance. They're going to need some injury luck to go their way, but I think the Spurs are going to mostly be cautious this year with Victor. They're going to limit his minutes a bit, prioritize keeping him healthy throughout an 82-game season, and because of that, they'll probably be on the outside looking in when it comes to the play-in race. But the Spurs are really good. Devin Vassell, the Spurs did it again, got another really good young player on a good contract that's going to age very, very well. It's just a great contract, again, for San Antonio. I love what they've done. I think that everything that they've done is very smart. Now, listen, if you're an NBA fan, go join the Discord. Link is in the description for that. You're going to want to be in there. We talk about the Spurs and a bunch of other NBA teams pretty much all day, every day. So it's a great spot to be in an NBA community, talk about the sport that you guys all love just like I do. But for me, the Spurs, Vassell's great. I think Keldon Johnson's a really good piece as well. I think he's an underrated player in today's league. Trey Jones, I think, is a good floor general. Probably not too much of a true starting point guard, in my opinion. But he's going to be kind of a play initiator for them, which I think is important. I do like the idea of starting Zach Collins this year at center. I think that is important for San Antonio to kind of limit some of the pressure on Victor Wembanyama and also kind of keeping his body healthy throughout the year. And then when it comes to Victor, just going to be an absolute team wrecker when it comes to the games this year. Some of the stuff he's done, I mean, you guys saw Thomas Bryant, right? Like, the stuff is ridiculous. You just can't make it up. He is an unreal player, an unreal talent. I literally talked all draft cycle about how great he was. People got tired of hearing how great he was, and I think I undersold how great he was. And I talked all draft cycle about how fantastic of a prospect he was. In fact, I called him perhaps one of the greatest prospects ever, and the greatest prospect that I'll ever have the privilege of evaluating during my entire life, because he is just that good. And I think he's going to really revolutionize the game. I think he's going to revolutionize Spurs basketball. I think there's a real chance he goes down as the best San Antonio Spur of all time, which that means a lot, because that means he perhaps surpasses a guy like Tim Duncan, which that's going to be very difficult to do. But he's got that type of talent, that type of potential, that I think it's a fair comparison and a fair thought that that's a possibility, not a guarantee, because Tim Duncan had a fantastic top 10, top 15-ish career of all time, but I think Victor is going to be a problem. That's the best way to put it. Now, when it comes to some of these other teams, and if you're looking at this, you got to say, okay, which teams are you unsure about? And there's a lot of them. I think bottom of the conference is pretty easy. We're going to put Portland there. Now, I don't even think Portland's that bad. With Malcolm Brogdon off the bench, you also have probably Shaedon Sharpe coming off the bench, if I had to guess, with a starting lineup of Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton. That's not that bad of a lineup. But the Western Conference is just crazy this year. So, that team's young. They're just going to have some, young moments. You also have Robert Williams off the bench. I mean, I do like what Portland has, actually. They're probably going to be the best 15th seed of all time. Not that that's something you really want on your resume, but I think that's what's going to happen here, just because I do think San Antonio, Utah, and Houston are a little bit better. But I think the Blazers, they're going to give a lot of opportunities for their young guys to develop, and this gives them an opportunity to go into the 2024 draft cycle as well, with potentially another very high pick, maybe pulling a guy like Ron Holland, Modest Buzelis, who I think would do wonders for them. There's a lot of good options, some bigs like Ade Mara. Obviously you could look at a guy like Alex Sarr, who's been tearing it up for the Perth Wildcats as well. The Blazers are in a great spot. I think long-term, I think trading Damian Lillard did set them up for long-term success, but it's going to come with some short-term shortcomings, and I think being at the bottom of the conference this year is really the first example of that, which, to be honest, it's not that far from where they were the last couple of years. So this is probably best case scenario, honestly, for Portland for their own long-term success at some point. So now this is where the video just keeps getting more and more challenging. Every single team I put in here, the more and more I want to rip my eyes out and cry, because there's not great options to place teams in certain spots. Like, for me, New Orleans could be a real dark horse team. They could also be a team that, if they're not healthy again, they are a play-in mix team. For me, I'm going to put them in a playoff spot. I think they're going to be a top 8 team in the Western Conference. Zion Williamson, when he's on the floor, is one of the better players in the NBA, and I truly mean that. Top 15-ish talent in the game. Just nobody can stop him from driving the basketball. No one can stop him from getting to his left hand. It sounds like it should be something relatively easy. Hey, force him right. He's powerful enough to go right to get back left, and he'll do that off of a spin a lot. He's just really strong. Of course, no surprise with saying that. I mean, he's built like a truck, but his talent level is strong to match it. And, you know, he's just somebody who, there's not really a singular answer for him. If you had to point to one specific player to maybe stop him, it would be a guy like Giannis, right? But even then, that's an Eastern Conference opponent, and Giannis isn't going to take an on-ball challenge all game long anyway. So really, Zion's kind of a wrecking ball, offensive juggernaut onto himself. And if there's ever a season where he strings together 50 to 60 games, the Pelicans are going to be a real problem. I just love the team up and down. Ingram, McCollum, of course, they get a lot of love. But a guy like Trey Murphy, I think he's going to be an ascending star in this league. Not necessarily a superstar or anything like that, but I think a really just great player. You know, I love Herb Jones. Valanciunas does a lot of valuable things for New Orleans as well, kind of resetting their offense when they need that, giving them a low post presence. And I think their pickups over the offseason, a guy like Jordan Hawkins, they needed more shooting. Really nice for them. Jose Alvarado's obviously such a great player. I mean, I just like what the Pelicans have. As I keep talking about them, I'm going to probably tag myself into them being a top 6 team. There's just too many good teams in the West right now. There's just too much talent. The NBA badly needs to expand. I have a video up on the channel about that. Make sure to go check that out after this one. But then let's get into the Los Angeles Clippers, and I think they are going to be a top 6 team for a couple of different reasons. I think the new player resting policy that the NBA came out with this year will encourage Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to play more games, play more back-to-backs, and we'll see the star duo on the floor together pretty frequently this season compared to years past, which that's not a high bar to pass, but I think they'll pass it. And anytime that those two guys have been on the court together, the Clippers are extremely tough to beat. I've seen it firsthand, a game where they combined for 88 points together. Just the two of them. It was one of the most insane performances I've ever seen on a basketball court. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are about as smooth as butter, and they probably still have a real shot at being considered the best duo in the NBA. Now, I know that sounds crazy. We haven't seen the playoff success to the degree that we would have hoped, but I mean, talent-wise, they're still there. And I think if they did pull off a deal for James Harden, they could potentially wiggle into this type of category. Now, I'm not going to say that they would for sure, but I think that Harden gives them all the things that they're lacking in terms of, you know, just a pure shot generator, and not just for himself, but for others. And I think giving Kawhi and PG really clean opportunities consistently would open up that offense even more. I think it would help Ivica Zubac a lot as a scorer on the rolls. It would be fantastic. But looking at the team as presently constituted, they're probably closer to 6 or 5 than they would be to, say, 2 or 3 in the West, but I still think that they're a very good team. They constantly win games even when PG and Kawhi sit, and when those two play, they're very, very good, and that's why I think the Clippers will be a top 6 team in the Western Conference. Another team that I think will be top 6 in the Western Conference, Paul George's former team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. This team is destined for a big season. They were in the play-in mix last year, lost in Minnesota to send them home in what was game 84 of the season for them. Definitely a tough situation. The Timberwolves were like the worst matchup for Oklahoma City a year ago. No Chet Holmgren. You're going up against the Twin Towers in Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And they got dominated on the glass. I still think that there are going to be some flaws this year for Oklahoma City when it comes to rebounding, but I don't really see a team that's going to consistently be able to slow down Oklahoma City from scoring the basketball. You look at what they're capable of, what they're able to accomplish, with their ability to drive the basketball. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the most prolific driver in the NBA. Him and Luka Doncic are right there 1 and 2, whichever way you want to slice it for driving the basketball. But then even off of that, Jalen Williams has really ascended as a driver of the basketball within the last 6 to 8 months of his action that we've seen him play. Josh Giddey was an ascending player last year. Three-point shot started to come around, but I think an underrated element was his floater. I think his floater improved significantly, and I think because of that, he's more of a scoring threat than he used to be, especially as a draft prospect. Because of that, I think Oklahoma City, which had Holmgren on the floor, they're going to be able to space you out and it's going to almost be a death lineup with still a 7'1" guy on the back end who can block shots, protect the rim, something OKC did not have last year. They won 42 games a year ago. I think they're a lock for at least 47, 48, 49 games. Mark Daigneault is one of the best coaches in the league, and they're just a flat-out really great basketball team. Sam Presti's done a great job with them. And that's 5 of my top 6 teams in the West. And there's a bunch of teams on here I want to include yet, which is just an absolute nightmare. I'm just really struggling to kind of place these teams at this spot. And then we're looking at my last spot here for the top 6. And we have the Lakers, Grizzlies, Suns, Kings, Mavericks. And this just feels absolutely terrible because I'm going to have some of these teams missing the playoffs, which just doesn't sound great to me at all, honestly. So when it comes to who I think probably gets that last top 6 spots, the Grizzlies are always great historically in terms of winning regular season games, and that's what I'm expecting here. Steven Adams is a beast on the offensive boards, 5 offensive rebounds per game. People are going to point to Ja Morant's suspension. That's okay. Marcus Smart, he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury. That's okay too. The Grizzlies just win games. They've been great without Ja Morant in the past. They've been great with Ja Morant in the past. At some point, Ja will come back, hopefully fresh and healthy and kind of locked into the team dynamic. There is, of course, a little bit of risk there with that, but I'm just kind of assuming here that they stay afloat when Ja is out. I'm looking at probably through the first 25 games, maybe they go 14-11 or 15-10. And then once they get Ja back, they can kind of enter their own. I think this is a good opportunity for Memphis to allow Desmond Bane to continue growing as a player, Jaren Jackson to continue growing as an offensive player, and ultimately the Grizzlies just do have a lot of talent. For me, I'm going to put them as a top 6 team in the West, and this is why the West is so terrible here, because I'm looking at this here, and somehow the team that made the conference finals, I'm going to have to try and figure out a spot for them. The Lakers here, I'm going to put them as a playoff team, and I'm going to put the Suns as a playoff team, and if you're doing the math, this doesn't really work. I'm now betting against the New Orleans Pelicans and Zion Williamson's health. I love the Pelicans roster. The Pelicans roster is really good. I just think the Lakers and the Suns are a bit more talented, especially at the top. You look at Durant, Booker, Beal. I do think that trio is going to have some marvelous results. I don't love the Yusuf Nurkic trade for Phoenix. I am fine with them trading Ayton. It's not in defense of Ayton. It's just more so I'm not a big Nurkic guy myself, especially at this point of his career. I thought earlier on he was doing some nice things for Portland, but I think as he's kind of aged, the NBA's evolved a little bit, and I think his role has diminished. They're going to point to his defensive rebounding. Sure, rebounding is very important, but I think he leaves a lot to be desired still defensively, and I think offensively, yes, he does some nice stuff, but I don't know if he's necessarily the big I would have pursued. And then the Lakers here, I have them kind of finishing 7th. This is basically a bet against the health on both of these two teams on why I don't have them in the top 6. I know people are going to be peeved about this. They're not going to be happy. The reality is LeBron James doesn't string together 82-game seasons anymore. Anthony Davis has never done that. You're looking at the Suns. Booker, Durant, and Beal all constantly miss time. I think because of that, these teams are going to have some issues with winning games and scoring the basketball when those stars are out. For me, we've seen the Clippers do that. We've seen the Grizzlies do that without their star player. We have yet to see the Lakers really play great basketball without LeBron and without Anthony Davis. I just am going to bet against the Suns doing that without their stars. Now, maybe both of these teams stay healthy. I look like a fool. They're probably both top 6 teams if they are healthy. Again, I think, the teams in the play-in mix are probably going to be 3-4 games back of teams in the top 6. This is a very tight race. And I could see this going a number of different ways, which is why I'm having so many issues with it. Then we get down to one really tough call. Kings fans, don't be mad at me. I'm putting you guys in the play-in mix. And the reason I'm doing that, people are going to be mad. Listen, the Kings were great last year. They finished top 3 in the West. They were a first-round exit. It doesn't have anything to do with the playoff exit. It does not. The Kings are going to be very, very competitive. In a normal year, normal Western Conference, the Kings are a lock to probably be a top 6 team in the West. This is not a normal year. The talent in the NBA right now is at an all-time high. And for me, the Kings, listen, they were great last year. They did have a pretty decent margin over some of the other teams in terms of the win-loss record. The reason I have them in the play-in mix, is because they were a team last year that was the healthiest team in the league. They rarely ever missed games with their starting players and their high minutes players, which, first of all, that's a credit to them. Their training staff did a great job. Domantas Sabonis is one tough son of a gun, played through a pretty serious thumb and kind of hand injury last year. And they've got durable guys, so that's a credit to them. I don't want to knock them for that, but the chances of them missing such little time again is pretty low, I would say. And then one thing that does not really translate year over year is typically clutch play. Last year, the Kings were one of the best teams in the clutch. That's not a surprise. De'Aaron Fox was the clutch player of the year. Just a fantastic season from him. If he doesn't hit so many game winners, though, the team's not nearly as good, right? If he hits 2 or 3 less game winners, all of a sudden their record looks quite a bit different. So, I still see the Kings as like a 43-44 win team. It's really not a drop-off from where they were a year ago that much, especially given some of the injury luck and kind of the clutch play luck. But when it comes down to it, it's just tough because I want to put the Kings in the top 6, to be honest. I think the Kings are really, really good. And I also think teams have a year to adjust to Mike Brown, figure out what he's doing with that team, some of their Zoom action. I think teams are going to have a better scouting report, a more thorough report on the Kings, and they're also going to come into the season taking them a bit more seriously, which means that there's going to be tougher matchups. It's kind of typical year 2 regression for a head coach. Not slandering the Kings here. You guys know I have a lot of respect for them, but I just do see some flaws. And then here we are with my favorite team. And if you do the math, we got our top 10 in here, which means I have the Mavericks actually missing the playoffs completely, missing the entire postseason again, which is what happened a year ago. And don't be mad at me, Mavs fans. Listen, I am a diehard Dallas Mavericks fan. I love Luka Doncic. He's my favorite player in the league. Really enjoy watching him play. Kyrie Irving, I think, a tremendous talent. The real issue with the team, though, is the Mavericks have, I think, little depth. I know people are going to say, oh, well, they have Tim Hardaway Jr. Listen, you have to compare it to some of the other teams and what the other teams have in terms of depth. And I think the Mavericks are thin there. And I think the biggest issue that people aren't really talking about with Dallas outside of the center position is the question of who's the third best player on the team. Is it Grant Williams? And that might sound like not that bad. Hey, Grant Williams is a good player. I just want to point out Grant Williams was 8th last year in the Celtics rotation. He was their 8th man. And that team was a conference finals team. Listen, the Celtics are way better than the Mavericks. That's okay. Grant Williams on a normal team, probably the 5th or 6th best player. Maybe 4th on a couple, right? The Mavericks are going to need him to step up big time. He's going to have to hit a lot of threes. He's going to get a lot of threes because of the way that teams are going to guard Kyrie and Luka. That's a great thing. The Mavericks are very, very talented. Probably the most talented 11 seed of all time if it comes to fruition like this. I have questions about the center spot. Is Dwight Powell starting 82 games? Is Derek Lively playing 25, 30 minutes a night? Can he do that without fouling out of games? I think that's going to be a problem. And that's okay. You should cut him loose, let him go block shots. That's what he's there for. But the Mavericks still have deficiencies. And I think, it pains me as a Mavs fan. It pains me to say that I don't think they're as good as people are kind of hoping, expecting, especially when you have a combination as good as Luka and Kyrie Irving. But this all stems back to what I said last February. When they traded for Kyrie Irving, I said the team was razor thin. They did a good job getting better this offseason, but I still don't think they got better enough. I think there's, again, real questions about what they have on their roster, and they don't have a lot of leeway to get better. They only have one tradable first-round pick right now. I guess you could look at it and say, hey, maybe Josh Green and Jaden Hardy have breakout years. And I think that's really the one thing you're hoping for. But then I would kind of argue that and say, look, Jason Kidd doesn't really even trust Josh Green that much. I think Olivier Maxence-Prosper is going to need some time in the G League this year. Jaden Hardy, I really love Jaden Hardy. I liked him a lot in his draft. I was super happy when the Mavs scooped him up. You just can't rely on a third point guard to be the difference maker here for the Mavs, especially in year 2 for a guard. That's a tough ask. The Mavericks are relatively thin. And again, the wing play is going to be spotty. I think the center play is going to be very spotty. And when it comes to a Western Conference that's just loaded, normal years, the Mavericks just with Luka Doncic alone should probably roll into a playoff spot. No questions asked. I think the West has passed them by a little bit, especially with some of the moves that Nico Harrison's made. It's been an absolute train wreck since he's taken over the job. I know people are going to say, oh, he made the conference finals. That was not really his doing. He brought in Reggie Bullock. That was his one move that he really made on that team. It was pretty much the existing team with just Jason Kidd as the head coach, which, good hire. I think Jason Kidd's a good coach, but the Mavericks, it pains me, but I have them on the outside looking in. Definitely tough. I know people are going to really disagree with this list. We'll come back to it in April. I'm sure there's going to be things I got wrong. I'm hoping to see the Kings make the playoffs again. That would be sweet. I'm hoping to see the Pelicans take that step. It's just hard to find room for all of these teams because there's really 11, 12, maybe even 13 or 14 really good teams this year in the Western Conference. And because of that, you have to have some miss. That's just the nature of the beast here in the NBA. I hope you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Go check out the previous video. Make sure to go watch that Eastern Conference prediction, and then also check out a suggested video here for you on the channel. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.